Hello, my name is Vicki Lenz, and I'm the director of the Elisha D Smith Public Library. People ask me all the time how a community this size has such a great library, or when they see the library for the first time, they say it's a gem. I tell them that 125 years ago, the owner of a company in Menasha Woodenware, D Smith, built an excellent library for the community, and the community has supported that library and maintained its excellence ever since. The residents of this community were thrilled to have that first library, and to this day, this library is loved and supported by its community members. I invite you now to hear about D Smith from one of our librarians, Ana Maria Acosta, and one of our dear friends from the Historical Society, Kathy Humski.
Welcome to our program. My name is Ana Maria Acosta. I'm a reference librarian here at the Menasha Public Library. This program about the life and legacy of Elisha D Smith is part of our 125th anniversary. Elisha's birthday is coming next Monday, March 29th, and if you're watching this program, I invite you to celebrate with us by interacting with us in our Facebook page. Please give us a like or leave your comment so your name would get entered into a lot of cool prizes that will be given during this weekend. Please visit our page at menashalibrary.org or our Facebook page as well to get more information about these events. To begin, I want to introduce a great advocate for our local history, Kathy Humski from the Menasha Historical Society. Together, we are going to discover so much more about the life of the man that gives name to our Menasha Public Library, Elisha D Smith. So we hope you enjoy learning so much about him as much as we did. Let's begin with Kathy Humski. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana. I am privileged to be here to talk about the life of the incredible Elisha Dickinson Smith. Whether we refer to him as Elisha, Elijah, the thing that matters most is that we understand the difference that Mr. Smith made in the city of Menasha. Elisha Dickinson Smith was born March 29, 1827 in Brattleboro, Vermont. As I mentioned, he has left us a lasting legacy, and I would like to tell you about some of the things he's given to the city of Menasha. Elisha moved in his life to several different places throughout the United States. His first move, when he was 17 years of age, was to Boston, Massachusetts, where he held a job until the age of 21 and moved to Woonsocket, Rhode Island, to take another position. It was in Woonsocket that he met Miss Julia Mori, who he married on October 24th of 1850. The day after their marriage, being quite an adventure, Elisha and Julia made the 10-day trip to Menasha, Wisconsin. And that trip was quite the travel experience. On October 25th, the bride and groom started out from Menasha, determined to work out a future in the wild conditions in the woods of Wisconsin. The trip to Menasha was quite an undertaking in those days. The trip was by rail to Buffalo, then to Detroit by boat, then to New Buffalo by the Michigan Central Railway, which at the time had strap iron rails part of the distance, then on to Chicago, then Milwaukee, and then Sheboygan by boat, and then to Fond du Lac by stagecoach, which made about 24 miles from sunrise to sunset, and then to Menasha by boat on Lake Winnebago, landing in Menasha the early part of November 1850. The bride and groom tramped courageously through the mud to the only hotel in town. They stayed there 6 weeks, after which time they went to keeping house in one room of a 2-room frame house. The other room was occupied by another family. What a difference this life was from their comfortable homes and their lives on the East Coast. As I tell this story, I've used a lot of books and newspapers, information from our Menasha Historical Society and here at the library, and I've found many pictures of early Menasha. Unfortunately, most of those pictures are not labeled, and so the years will vary. Just so that you understand, it's not sequential as I tell the story of his life. So in the spring of 1952, as he's beginning to make his living in Menasha, he purchased a small, struggling wooden pail factory for about $1,200. About that time, his father-in-law, Spencer Mori, who wasn't really excited about Julia moving to the wilds of Wisconsin, came for a visit. So he found his daughter living in that 2-room house in the wilderness, and he urged Smith to forget this folly and return to Woonsocket, where there was a cashier's job waiting him. And Smith's reply was, "I would not go back if you gave me the bank." Smith struggled through the panic of 1857, and his plant burned down. But then came the railroad to feed the markets of Milwaukee and Chicago. The rails were twice as fast and cost half as much as steamboats. So he introduced tubs, barrels, kegs, and a variety of wooden containers, and his business began to boom. Smith got some legal and financial help from his father-in-law, and he expanded his operations and began to buy forest land in northern Wisconsin. And incredibly, by the mid-1870s, his Menasha Woodenware was the largest operation of its kind in the world. While his business brought him great wealth, he looked on money as a trust to benefit others in the community. The photos that you see are a depiction of early life in Menasha. The photo on the left showing the trolley and the wagon. You can see wooden sidewalks in the background. Trolley tracks had been made, and the rules for using the trolley were that it could not go over 7 miles per hour, as the Smiths or anyone riding were soon to learn. However, when they went around curves, the speed limit for those trolleys was 4 miles an hour. On the lower right, the picture of a steamboat shows, if you look closely, logs in the front of the boat. And in the background is the Elisha D Smith Public Library, which he would have built and donate to the city. In the center, we have some mannequins that our Historical Society has set up in the library in a tall cabinet that belonged inside the original library. We try to change this display from time to time so that especially children could see what things were like in the era of the 1850s to the early 1900s. This depiction of Mr. and Mrs. Smith show what they were most likely wearing when they made the trip here to Menasha. when we do our tours for third grade students at our Historical Society and here at the library, we explain to the students that women were not allowed to wear anything but long dresses all the way to the ground, and they find that almost unbelievable. Of course, the gentleman in the picture is very finely dressed, as if Mr. Smith were going to a very special social occasion. This beautiful lithograph hangs in the Menasha Library, and Ana will tell you a little bit more about that.
We have at the library a copy of this beautiful painting. It is a lithograph in commemoration of the Menasha Corporation sesquicentennial, celebrating in 1999. The artist is Richard Barrett. Mr. Barrett was originally from Florida. He attended graduate school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Richard Barrett and his wife, Susan Gossin, and her 3 children reside in New Jersey. Susan is a 5th-generation descendant of Elisha D Smith. The original was created on a wooden panel covered with linen and gesso with rabbit skin glue and chalk. The medium was tempera, an emulsion of egg yolk, linseed, stand and spike, lavender oils combined with pigments, which is a technique that dates from antiquity. You would be able to see it in our 2nd floor at the library, and it really shows how interesting must have been that trip. Let's learn a little bit more about Elisha D Smith.
So Menasha Woodenware becomes Menasha Corporation. One very interesting story is that we could have had the Elisha Dickinson Smith Public Library of Atlanta, Georgia. We could have seen semis driving the roads that say Atlanta Corporation instead of Menasha Corporation. Just by a twist of fate, Mr. Smith made a decision to settle in Wisconsin rather than the Georgia area, and we are so lucky that he did. On the left-hand side is a collage that we have framed and in our Historical Society Museum, and it chronicles the family of Elisha Smith, his 2 sons, who basically took over the running of the business when Mr. Smith was ready to step back, some of his grandchildren, and some interesting facts about the woodenware itself. The picture on the upper right is the stave yards. Stave meaning a piece of wood kind of in a sort of horizontal piece of wood that was bent and used in the making of barrels and kegs. And so all of those were stored in those what they called stave yards. The plant is across the river, and on the bottom, in the bottom photo, it shows the Menasha Corporation, the Menasha Woodenware Company factory, the front view of the factory, so the other side of the building that you see in the top photo. Some of these pictures are just amazing, and it's so exciting to find them when we're going through photos and literature and artifacts at the museum. As you can see, the top left photo must have been taken, we're thinking, in the 1800s. As I looked more closely at it, it looks like there may be 3 very young boys in the center of the photo next to the bicycle. And wouldn't it be a wonderful story to find out what they happen to be doing there? Were they employed there? Were they the children of employees? I guess we'll never know. The one thing that comes to mind as I show this picture is it's so important to label photos and memorabilia because we have thousands of pictures at the museum, and it's just so sad not to know exactly when they were taken and who the people might be. For instance, the bottom left photo of one of the train boxcars from the Menasha Woodenware. It would really be interesting to find out if any of those gentlemen belonged to our family lineage. At the upper right is another photo of stave yards, and they grew as the company became more successful. Switching ahead several decades, as you can see, there is a photo that is labeled the Menasha Woodenware Pail Factory, and the photo taken October 1st, 1935. And I'm thinking perhaps some of the audience might know who some of those gentlemen were. There were women working at the factory during those times. Unfortunately, we don't really have too many photos of what the work was like for women inside the factory. Moving on with the story of Mr. Smith. It happens that there was a young lady who had moved to Menasha in the mid-1800s, and her name was Lucy Lee Pleasants. She was part of a family whose home was down in the south, and after the Civil War, their home burned, and luckily Mr. Pleasants had land that he had purchased on Doty Island in Menasha. So the family moved here, and it was quite a different life, as it was, I'm sure, for Mr. Smith and for Julia. When they came here to Menasha, Lucy Lee had already graduated high school when some of her younger siblings had not. So they were some of the first students to graduate from Menasha High School. So Lucy Lee wrote poetry. She had a love of books, and she had a desire for the children of Menasha to become as learned as they could. She wanted to share her quest for knowledge and thought about the idea of starting a free public library. Lucy Lee put an anonymous note in a Menasha newspaper advertising a meeting at the National Hotel, which you can see on the right-hand side of the photo on the right, of very early Menasha with no paved roads. The National Hotel burned down some years after that photograph and was replaced by the Hotel Menasha. So at Lucy Lee's meeting, one of the guests was Elisha D Smith. So the group talked about the importance of forming the library and decided that they would move ahead and ask for donations from the citizens of Menasha. Mr. Smith said, "I will donate $500 if the citizens of Menasha can come up with another $1,000, and we can go ahead with the start of a free public library." So one of the wonderful things that we have at the Historical Society is this actual list of the document, and I should be wearing gloves here, the document showing how much people said they could donate toward the library. And it's just so interesting, and it was done very well with the names of the donors on the right-hand side and the amounts over here on the left. Most people donated $1 or 50 cents. There was such a consensus that this library was so needed and a lot of excitement about the potential of building it. But there were also donations that didn't have to do with money. Ana.
So definitely the community members also recognize the importance of the library for the city and donated always accordingly. That list that Kathy showed is available here, a copy for review. And chances are that you can find probably a family member that supported us. Among the acts of generosity, the Northwestern Mail newspaper from the city of Madison in January 20, 1898, noted the lumber dealers provided the shelving for the library. A small boy who had learned printing made the borrowers' cards. A poor woman volunteered for cleaning the floors as her offering. Ladies from the community filled the reading rooms to prepare and paste the book pockets in each of the materials. The Library Commission in Madison sent a cataloger to organize the collection, and with this donation, the library was then open to the public with Miss Pleasance in charge.
So explaining the pictures here, the labeled picture, of course, Miss Lucy Lee Pleasance as a young woman. Below that is a photo of the Tookshire building, not to be confused with the Tookshire shoe store, which would have been across the street. The Tookshire building was located where the McClone Agency is now, downtown Menasha, and the first free library was on the upper level of that building. The old City Hall is to the right, and I think many of you will recognize this photo. The fire department was on the lower level, the police station was there, a small jail cell was there, the City Hall was there. The horses had a barn behind the City Hall, and the building itself stayed downtown Menasha until I'm thinking the mid-1970s. On the lower right is a beautiful portrait of Lucy Lee Pleasance, and that portrait today hangs in the children's department here at the library. Going back to Mr. Smith. At a council meeting, after all the money had been earned and the first library was established on that second floor of the Tookshire building, Mr. Smith approached the city council with the stunning news that the library was outgrowing the space. We needed something new here in Menasha, something that would come to serve the community for decades. And he proposed donating $25,000 for the construction of a new library to be located on Mill Street in Menasha, corner of Mill Street and Water Street, right along the canal. Also, with this incredible donation, he mentioned that the land across from his home, which is near Smith Park, he would donate for another $25,000. He made the purchase of all the land where Smith Park is now, our beautiful park. And I'm sure that nearly all of you have been to Smith Park, have enjoyed picnics and the play yard and having weddings in the park. Just a beautiful contribution that Mr. Smith made to Menasha. On the lower right is Mrs. Smith, Julia Mori Smith, who was his constant companion, who went through difficult times with him, but who also felt that Menasha was her home from the very beginning. And they were a couple together until Mr. Smith's death, only 1 year after the opening of the library. The photos here show on the left-hand side the cornerstone of the library, and the date on that photo is February 12th, 1898. And there were articles in several local newspapers. And I'm choosing one here because it's really vivid and explains what the day was like. The excavation for the foundation of the edifice was begun on Saturday, February 12th, and the cornerstone was laid on the 18th day of March, in the presence of a vast concourse of people. Mr. Smith was in California, but was well represented by his 5 grandchildren, who officiated in his presence. Mori Smith, his eldest grandson and son of Charles R. Smith, spread the mortar on that stone. Julia, second daughter of Henry R. Smith, and Carlton, the young son of Charles R., held the ribbons which drew the cornerstone into place. Margaret, Henry Smith's eldest daughter, deposited the box of records, which included a picture of her grandfather Smith, while Helen, Henry's youngest daughter, placed a bouquet of flowers on the box. The raw day turned into a cold, drizzly one before that ceremony was over. Many school children were there to sing the Star-Spangled Banner, and a band led the children into marching formation, and speakers began to talk. Mayor Pleasance, A.A. Cook, John Strange, and others were on the program, but some were beaten by the weather. Just as Silas Bullard got up to speak, the rains came pelting down. Umbrellas went up like a great tent, and a drenching shower was on. And you can see that visible in the left-hand corner of the picture, the umbrellas that the people were holding. The people stood their ground, though, and didn't run away. Their interest in this library was great, and they proposed to see this important ceremony through to the end. Though the rain fell in torrents, the crowds remained to the last to see it all. And on the bottom right is a view of our beautiful library after it was dedicated and built and opened on October 21st of 1898. The Mill Street Bridge is on the right, and many people are familiar with that swing bridge. If you look to the corner of the photo, there is no Racine Street Bridge yet. You can see the steeple of St. Mary's Church rising in the distance on the right-hand side. And over the top of the library building itself, the steeples that are shown are from Menasha High School, which was right where the current library is today. The Mill Street Library, which many of us remember, was open for 71 years. in Menasha. And these are some of the photos that we have from the interior of the building. First, on the bottom left is a cabinet that we happen to have at the Historical Society. And I think many people will remember the old card catalog drawers that you pulled out to find the location of the book that you were looking for. Up above that is a photo of the elaborate rooms upstairs in the library. And on the left-hand side, although it's difficult to see, is a beautiful piano. On the right-hand side, you'll see a group of people sitting at a table, and the surprising use of a lot of live plants, a lot of greenery. The picture on the lower right shows wooden chairs back to back, and I have to wonder why they were set up that way. Maybe it was that they were going to have children playing musical chairs. It's hard to know. And the center picture is a photo of a beautiful Christmas tree, strung with tinsel and decorated, and it must have been quite a sight for the young children who came to visit the library. And as you'll note, the portrait of Lucy Lee Pleasance is hanging on the wall behind the tree. And that portrait was donated by the Smith family. So this was well after Lucy Lee had passed away. So the library had books and much more. They had what was known as a traveling library, and Ana will give you some information about that.
So, about the traveling libraries, in the opening ceremony of the library in Mill Street, the most important information that was shared to the community was the importance of public libraries and the traveling libraries. But to give a context of where they come from, it is important to recognize that it was an effort that grew from the state of New York in 1893 by Mr. Melville Dewey, who inaugurated the New York State system of traveling libraries. It was the response to offer people of the country a continuous supply of fresh books. Later, by 1895 and 1896, other states like Iowa, Ohio, and Michigan formed similar systems. In Wisconsin, the expansion of the traveling library system happened with the effort of the Senator J.H. Stout from Menominee. The model assured that books could be sent from community to community, and farmers could be supplied with an abundance of wholesome and interesting reading material, always at a very comparatively low cost. There would be no need of expense for salaries for a librarian or rent. It was based on the support of individuals and associations, like the ones that was formed for the Menasha Free Public Library. Basically, it was the effort of private persons without the need of the state to be involved. Many traveling libraries succeeded because of the support of women clubs as well. Wherever there was a women club, chances would be that they would be supporting and interested that the people could participate in that system. Elisha D Smith requested to have 15 of those for the vicinity of Menasha. And this effort still continues for us here at the library. We have our book bike that travels to the schools, the market, other outdoor events. We want to serve the people that are homebound and unable to visit the library, so we have delivery service for members that need those materials. The library definitely is always looking since the beginning to have a wonderful collection, and we want to note that from the beginning it grew from a few hundred to almost more than 1,000, and in very few years. It was always looking to respond to the needs of and interests of the community. It began with books that were written in German and Polish and were brought to the community to support them on their needs, which, for example, is also an effort that we're doing with our collection of Spanish materials. With that, Kathy will explain a little bit more about the library and Mr. Smith.
As Ana mentioned, books were ordered in different languages, and it was a decision by Mr. Smith and Miss Pleasance to order them to make the immigrants feel welcome and more comfortable. And here we have a sample of a Polish elementary textbook. And we like to show this to our third graders who come in for tours. And a really fun fact is now with the internet and with the use of Google, the children can type in the Polish words and they can be translated into English words so that we can know now what this elementary textbook says. Oh, and I should mention that Lucy Lee Pleasance, when she worked here at the library for 23 years, started out at the salary of $50. And that $50 was for 1 year. She was truly dedicated. This picture gives an idea of the beautiful gift of the land for Smith Park. It was taken from a drone taken by our president of the Historical Society, Nicholas Jevney, who I think has done more to capture what life is like in Menasha than just anyone else I know. He takes incredible videos. We're making tomorrow's history, and he is helping to capture it, and our collection of DVDs is growing, and we couldn't be happier about this. So Smith Park, as you can see on the banks of our beautiful Fox River. Across the street from the park is the Memorial Building. And that building on the right-hand side is our museum. And we hope when the pandemic has passed and life returns to normal, we hope to have lots of visitors at the museum. We really enjoy showing artifacts and some of the wonderful things that people have donated. Other donations that Mr. Smith made were, he donated thousands of trees. He had been on a trip and saw the community's beauty with so many trees, and although, of course, Wisconsin was pretty rugged country when he came, he decided to beautify the city by giving his employees at the Woodenware and other citizens thousands of trees to plant in their yards and around the city. And as we discussed with our third graders, the trees, one little boy said, "I think one of them is in my front yard." And we just had to chuckle at that. At the, excuse me. It was also the habit of Mr. Smith to provide a fund at bookstores out of which children of Menasha who couldn't buy books but were anxious to learn could be supplied with their own. He delighted in distributing flour and groceries where there was a lack, and he had it so arranged with the good angel of the community that he should not know to whom supplies were sent. Hundreds of little ones in the community had their feet warmly clothed in the winter and their bodies warmed because of his good heart, and they never knew from whom the good came. Perhaps the most touching gift of all was that in his will, Mr. Smith had a provision to provide funds for the burial of people whose families could not afford the service. He also made donations to churches and to colleges, as printed in one of the local newspapers. No words of praise can be too great for this splendid token of Mr. Smith's public spirit. Menasha today unites in one grateful voice, thanking its leading citizen for his princely act of munificence. Coming here a poor young man nearly half a century ago, he has seen the city grow up about him, and during all that time, he's been one of the very central figures in its growth and development. So long as Menasha shall stand, the name of Elisha D Smith will live in the grateful memory of its people, and the Smith Memorial Library and Park will constitute a monument to his industry, his public spirit, and his splendid generosity that will endure for all time. The press wishes to congratulate both him and the city of Menasha on this magnificent earnest of his splendid citizenship. So our legacy at the library continues with the celebration of 125 years. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Our presentation will be shown on the library's online program page in the future and on the Menasha Historical Society's YouTube channel. I'd like to thank Ana Maria for the research she's done and for participating in this presentation. I'd also like to thank Nicholas Jabney for filming the program. And special thanks to the family of Elisha D Smith for continuing to support our community over the past 8 generations. Thank you again. Good night.